Hey, welcome to this new section on the command line for PC users. So I'm going to keep this very short and try and get us onto Python as soon as possible. But first, I want to talk about why I even have this section in the course. Why bother with knowing any command line? And by the way, if you do know some command line commands, you're comfortable making files, navigating, changing directories, that sort of thing, then skip this entirely and move on to installation. Okay, with that said, our goals in this section are to define what the command line is and talk about why you should care, learn some basic command line navigation and the basics of how the file structure works, and then we'll learn to manipulate files and folders using the command line. Okay, so let's talk about what the command line is and why you should care. The command line is basically just an interface to your computer. Growing up, I was used to using my mouse and a GUI, a graphical user interface. If I needed to find a file, I would click, double click, here's a file. I found it, okay, then double click to open it. Or, as another example, I would go in here and to move a file, I could click this and then move it into that directory. And that would be one example of using a graphical user interface, whether it's on a Mac or a PC. The command line, however, is a text-based interface. So it's definitely uglier, it's not as pretty, but it's also way faster and also more powerful. There's a lot of things you can do using the command line that you can't do otherwise. So there's special keywords we type in. I mean, you've probably seen this before. If you're completely new to the command line, you still have probably seen it in movies where hackers are typing code really fast and text is scrolling by and all this stuff is happening. That's usually supposed to be a command line interface that you see in those films. So here's an example of something that you couldn't do without the command line. If I copy this command and move over to my shell, this is the command line, and I'll talk about how we get this, how we open it up, what PowerShell is in just a moment. But I'm just going to show you, if I paste that command in and I hit enter, it goes through every process on my computer, hundreds of them, and finds everything that's currently running and prints it out. So we can see there's things like, Web Account Manager, Storage Service. I mean, I don't know what 95% of these are actually doing, but this is happening behind the scenes. And our command line provides a interface, a window into that world that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise. But that's not really why you should care about it for this course. It is cool, it's powerful, but for this course, it really comes down to one thing and one thing only. To run Python, we need to have a command line where I can type the Python command. So if you tried this on your command line right now, if you haven't installed Python, if you're on Windows, this won't work. You'll have to wait until we get to the installation section. If you're on a Mac or a Linux-based machine, then it usually comes with Python pre-installed. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but the point is we need to be able to use the command line to run Python, and we need to be able to navigate using the command line. For example, if there's a folder on my desktop, I'm going to show commands that we haven't seen yet. We're going to learn them in this section. I could find that file and then execute it with Python. And this is where we're going. We have to be able to find a file with the command line so I can run Python on the file. This file contains my code, and it's a very silly app. All it does is print hello 10 times. But the point is we need to be able to do this. We're going to write our code somewhere and then save it on your desktop. You probably will have a bunch of folders because we'll have a bunch of files in this course. We need to be able to save them and then find them in the command line, which again, it's just another interface. I already showed you this file actually using the GUI with the double clicking on the folder. I did the same thing through the command line, and then I executed it. And I couldn't do that without the command line. So in the next video, I'll have you start writing code. We'll dive into PowerShell, talk about the differences between PCs and Macs, and then start writing commands as soon as possible. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Just know that the command line, if you've never used it, it's not as intimidating as it seems. It could be if you had to get into some very serious, intense system level stuff, but for what we're going to use it for, just finding files and folders, making new files and folders, and most importantly, executing files with Python, it's not that bad. It might be a little slower than what you're used to up front, because most people who are new to it are comfortable with a mouse, but it's worth it in the end. And it's also what you'll see me using in the course. So if you do want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing, then the command line is what you'll need to use. All right,